Hey, everybody. Welcome to Reeducated, Season 2, Episode 2. Reeducated is a podcast where we rethink, relearn, and get reeducated on many topics relating to our Black community here in the state of New Mexico. Before we get into it, as always, we want to thank the Office of African American Affairs for allowing us to have this platform and for our voices to be heard and for us to reach out to the community and build these relationships and continue to elevate us and push us forward in this movement for equity and equality.
Yes. And again, thank you all for listening in. I'm one of your hosts, Static Shock. And then we also have.
He said Static Shock. What does that make me? I'm Catwoman.
All right. Catwoman is Static
I
Shock
had to
today.
go with Halle Berry. Like the Halle Berry version of Catwoman is like, oh, love it. For real, though, I'm Danny Golden.
And I'm Devon, a.k.a. Dave, for this season.
Got it. Danny and Dave coming at you. Like I said, this is Season 2, Episode 2. Last episode, we did a recap of all of the topics we've covered and kind of did some previews of what we'll be talking about in future episodes. And so that leads us to today.
Right. In today's topic, we're going to be talking specifically about athletics because, me, I love talking about my athletics.
Coach Dave.
For this episode, we're going to specifically talk about athletes and whether or not they should get paid. And towards the end of the episode, we'll go a little bit deeper into the legislation that came into this this regular session for this year. But let's start with whether or not student athletes should get paid. Danny, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts, okay, the first place that I feel like we should start when having this conversation is like, what is the current setup? Because you know what all of the stipulations are surrounding athletes and compensation currently. Like, what does that look like? So basically, they cannot be compensated?
Well, it just depends on what state you're in. So there's like specific states. It's not a national mandate, but there are specific states that have passed legislation, and our state is one of those that are looking to pass legislation. But I know for sure California. I can't remember some of the other ones, but essentially you get compensated based off of your name. And so if like they have your jersey or merchandise that the school is selling, you get a portion of what they make based off of that. Whatever agreement, whatever the numbers are.
So there's some states where that happens and they are profiting off of those types of things, but the player doesn't get anything from it.
And so a lot of the things that universities and schools used to do, they would have the jersey without the name of the individual.
Wow. So it like just the number.
Yeah.
So people know what's up, but it's not giving credit where credit's due, essentially.
Exactly. And this recently happened, I want to say within the last couple of years. Initially, it's been a whole thing since the inauguration of the NCAA. But essentially, when it comes to players getting paid, it was originally like you just got your scholarship if you play professionally or overseas, depending on what that looked like. You were ineligible to play in college because you lost your amateur status.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it has to do with the status.
Yeah.
If you get paid, you're
no
now
longer
a professional. You're no longer amateur. Oh, okay.
Exactly.
I see.
And so that changed from only getting your scholarship to being able to get your scholarship and cost of attendance, which depending on where you're living, will depend on how much you get from your scholarship. And so some places it might be $1,200 a month for a scholarship. Some might be $3,200 depending on what the cost of living is in that location. But yes, it was originally just a scholarship, then cost of attendance, which added about $300 to like $700 depending on where you are. So athletes got more money to now. Players are able to put their name in for being a professional and still maintain their amateur status.
Okay.
And be able to get paid off of the their jersey sales or merchandise
Right.
sales or anything that has to do with the school getting profit based on the player's name.
Well, I mean, my take on that, it seems from, what you're telling me that seems more equitable. It
Yeah.
seems like regardless of if you're a student or what your classification is, if there's money being made off of your name, your likeness, anything like that, I mean,
Mhm.
it applies in every other aspect of business and, entertainment and
Yeah.
things like that. So, I think maybe that's what people don't realize. It's just like it's just equitable
Yeah.
and it's just, that's just what they're like, I'm putting in the work.
Mhm.
People showed up to see me hit these 3-pointers and slam this ball. So
Yeah. And what's interesting about college and student athletes is um I think this was a conversation I had whenever I was with some of the other student athletes and some of my brothers and sisters on campus at the time
Mhm.
that we're not we are labeled as student athletes, but we're more so athlete students
Mm,
just because depending on what sports you're playing, the main sports that you look at are men's and women's basketball.
mhm.
You have football, and then you have volleyball as kind of those main sports that you have a lot of spectators. You're getting
Right.
a lot of the money to the institutions, and
Okay.
so with those sports, essentially, you don't necessarily have all the freedoms that you would playing in another sport. And
Mhm.
so we're pushed into three different three different concentrations when it comes to the university.
Mhm.
You have liberal arts and university studies,
Okay.
you have communications,
Mhm.
and then you have business.
Are you is there a reason why you're pushed in that? Is it because those are like easier programs considering the load that you'll have with your athletics or
Well, I and the reason I wouldn't call it easier is
yeah.
because you're taking away from the work of individuals who want to study those programs.
Yeah.
So I
I'm
definitely
like,
don't want.
that's what
Yeah.
my degree is in communication. I'm like, hey now, what are we saying here? But it's not. Those are
No.
just kind of the areas that kind of work with
Yeah, are more.
athletic programs.
Yeah, these areas are more flexible
Okay.
when it comes to like athletes and their schedules and
Flexible is a good word.
yeah. But it's definitely a lot. It's definitely not easier just
Yeah.
because again, it's it sucks because you're putting us into you're saturating these degree fields
Mhm.
and it's taking away from again the individuals who want to go into communications or want to be in
Yeah.
business or have multiple things that they want to do and maybe want to be very versatile in their education so they get into liberal arts and university studies but
Yeah.
because all the athletes are in there there's like just this bad reputation and bad connotation
Yeah.
to these different degree fields
Yeah, that makes
but
sense.
essentially when it comes to student athletes like because we don't have all of the same for lack of better words the same I wouldn't say privileges,
Mhm.
but that's the only word that comes to mind.
Yeah.
So, but because we don't have the same privileges and being flexible in our schedule, wanting to study what we want to do, and
Mhm.
then being able to make more money
Mhm.
or make a decent amount of money,
Mhm.
it just makes it a little bit more difficult to uh, really be invested in
Yeah.
the NCAA and being a student athlete because,
Yeah.
me, I came to college because yes, I got a free scholarship or I got a full ride scholarship to go play, but I want to get an education,
Yeah,
not just a
100%.
degree.
Yeah, and education, and that's that it shouldn't be come unavailable to you
Hmm.
just because you are an athlete student, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for breaking that down, Dev.
yeah, of course. But just kind of going back to it, it's it's just difficult when you are a student athlete, or it has been difficult because again, if you're really good at your craft and you're really good at what you do, you should be able to get paid or get sponsored by
Right.
somebody who sees that talent, sees that greatness, and
Mhm.
wants to invest in you, not only to make a decent living, because student athletes, we are just given this chunk of money. We're not
Mhm.
really given any lessons on
Yeah.
how to utilize it, how to maintain it,
Mhm.
and then it's not even enough realistically for the demand on our bodies. Like, we got to
Right.
eat two times as much as a regular individual.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have our schedule. Like, there's certain resources that we have to get out of pocket
Mhm.
just to be able to keep our scholarships.
Yeah, and I think I from that perspective, it's like it has to be I feel like it should be worthwhile for all parties involved,
Hmm.
and it just seems like from, knowing and talking to you, knowing other student athletes, there's a lot of cost for you personally. There's
Yeah.
a lot of cost for you physically.
Hmm.
What you're putting your body through is strenuous. The hours that y'all put in, the
Yeah.
traveling that you do, it just seems like that should all be covered, and I don't think that that's unreasonable. I don't think it's going above and beyond. We're not talking like $1 million contracts for, these student athletes. We're just, I think the aim seems to be just to make it so that it's not more of a strain to play. Like you can really just focus on the game and you can focus on your education
Yeah.
because, just like anybody, not having what you need can
Hmm.
be like stressful. Not having enough money to cover your costs of living can be stressful for anyone.
Yeah, definitely. And just to add on to it, you got some people, again, me, like I was very privileged in a lot of ways of having a good, strong support system, and my family was doing okay. But
Mhm.
for some players, like, that's their ticket,
Mhm.
and they have to use their Pell Grant. They have to
Mhm.
use certain
Their student.
scholarships,
Mhm.
everything. Their money has to go back home just because their family is living in a low income housing,
Yeah.
or there are certain things that happen with them growing up that they're not set up.
Yeah, and they're the one. Like they're the one.
Exactly.
A lot of people are like they're the one that's gonna raise everybody else up,
Hmm.
and they have that. I think we can't forget about that. That
Oh
a lot
yeah.
of a lot of these students have their families on their shoulders that they're carrying, and I think that that's honorable, and that's
Hmm.
what we want to encourage.
Oh
Is
yeah.
hard work and lifting yourself up. All right, well then, like let's encourage that.
Exactly. And so yeah, I definitely think that when it comes to student athletes, there needs to be a lot more compensation, like just a free getting for more or less a free degree, not
Hmm.
necessarily an education,
Yeah.
getting some okay housing, and then just getting some gear.
Hmm.
I personally don't think that for the amount of money that these players are putting in and getting for the
Hmm.
university,
Hmm.
I don't think that's enough to like compensate them for what they truly earn and deserve.
Yeah, I mean, if you really think about it, like look at the type of money that like pours into these institutions. It's
Mhm.
like, yeah, you have tuition and everybody's paying tuition whether you're an athlete or not,
Yeah,
right? But where does all the icing on the cake come from?
exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, let's be real. Where does the icing come from? What are y'all doing on Saturdays? Y'all tailgating.
Yeah.
Y'all out there having fun. So it's like, I feel like everyone knows what's up,
Yeah. Like, come
but
on. And it's like with the tailgatings, what they could easily do is buy sections or sell sections of the parking lot that
Mhm.
could go towards supporting these kids,
Yeah.
supporting these students.
Yeah.
Part of the concessions that are they're spending
Mhm.
goes to students,
Yeah.
selling alcohol or,
Yeah.
other items at the game. Part of those concessions go to the student athletes. So now
Yeah.
it's like, okay, we're starting to, I mean, we still have a long ways to go, and there needs to be a lot of refining for the system,
Mhm.
but at least we're starting to get to paying these student athletes.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, I think we should go on and take a little break. We're going to
Hmm.
hear some beats from uh, Mr. M. Scott Loves Life. So enjoy, and we'll be right back after this. All right, everybody, welcome back to Re-Educated, a podcast where we rethink, relearn, and get re-educated on many topics concerning the Black community here in the state of New Mexico. You just heard some original music from M. Scott Loves Life. You can find him on Instagram at M. Scott Loves Life. And you can visit his company, who's responsible for all of the amazing post production that's done on this podcast, at bettersense.com. That's BTTRSNC.com. So we're getting back into it. Today on episode 2, we are discussing compensation for student athletes. And before the break, Devin kind of got me caught up, gave me the rundown on what the current setup is for athletes being compensated or not compensated, depending on what state you're in. And we talked about really where that conversation lies, more so revolving around some of the main, I hate to say main, but
Yeah.
the more populated events are for certain sports. So get us into what that looks like for the other sports
Yeah.
and other athletes.
Well, essentially, and this is from my understanding whenever I was playing, when it came to certain sports like the golf, the tennis, it was like hybrid in the sense of you could play for like money or you could play to get in tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
You could get sponsorships. Like it was
Right.
all those different things that you're able to add on to getting like maybe a scholarship. And so for a lot of those sports, like it wouldn't be full ride. It would be
Okay.
like a partial scholarship, but that provided more opportunities to get additional funding because it was a part-time scholarship.
Okay.
And so when it comes to like student athletes getting paid, for some of these part-time scholarships, I think one of the things, and Marcus had mentioned it while we're in the break, is providing a work study for these student athletes, or providing some type of internship or something that helps them to get into specific whatever field they want to get into, or make some money on the side, or just providing additional opportunities.
Yes.
And I also think, sorry, I didn't
No, that's okay.
but I also think one of the things, just to get into like a equity standpoint for student athletes, is I think paying taxes to help support these other programs that might not necessarily get the same amount of money or sponsorships that you would get from like the main sports.
Okay, taxes on on the students, on people in general. How would those taxes be allocated?
Well, I would say like taxes. So if we're paying the student athletes, and say for instance like a student from like like one of the main sports gets like a sponsorships or signs for like a sponsorship, part of that money going into like a pool
Okay.
to help support the student athletes that aren't a part of the main.
I think that makes perfect sense because I mean, at the end of the day, like it's reciprocal, right? You couldn't play the sport without like the institution, like
Yeah.
that construct wouldn't exist. So, to a certain extent, the institution and the other people that are attending that institution should be able to benefit some. I think
Yeah.
that that's totally reasonable. Just kind of siphoning just a bit, of what's garnished for those athletes and those events, and just like you said, putting that into a pool, and then everyone wins.
Yeah.
And then those other sports are better funded, because right now, do they just more so rely on like private, when I think golf and tennis and things like that,
Yeah.
I think of like more private like funding for
Yeah.
those.
Not definitely. And
Yeah.
then usually those type of sports are individuals from more affluent families. And so a lot of times, like, they don't even necessarily need extra money because they
It's
have
taken care of. I
exactly.
got you. I see.
And so, but for sports like, again, men's and women's basketball, for
Football.
football, volleyball, even soccer,
Mm-hmm.
but out here in New Mexico, like it's not as many black
Mm-hmm.
student athletes, which there's like one or two, but
Yeah.
even with like some of those other sports,
Mm-hmm.
like we're a lot of times we're in the trenches.
Mhm.
We're just trying to find a way, whether it be through education or through getting contracts professionally to
Mhm.
help our family get out of this, rabbit hole.
Mhm.
It's so much that we have to do, and I think
Yeah.
that there should be two options, or it should be negotiable how you go about signing like your contract for being a
Mhm.
student athlete.
Yeah.
I think you should have it to where you get it maybe like I think like these student athletes should get full ride scholarships
Mhm.
just because of the money they bring into the
Yeah,
university.
100%.
But I think it should be twofold. You can either get a scholarship, a full ride scholarship, and you have like part time work
Okay.
that you do for the university, and
Mhm.
so you're getting fully paid, but you don't have to have the same demand for classes as
Got
like other
you.
students, because again, it's like your job is
Yeah.
being an athlete
Mhm.
and bringing in money, bringing in fans,
Mhm.
doing marketing and recruiting. Like
Mhm.
we're doing all these different things, and it's
Yeah.
like, yo, we're not getting paid extra to show the new recruit around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're not getting extra to like post, repost all this stuff that's
On
for our university.
socials.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah.
you pay companies to do that. You pay individuals for getting your
Those
brand out
services,
and
but they
doing
want that for free from y'all. I
exactly,
see.
you
Yeah.
know.
That doesn't seem quite fair.
And so either doing it like that to where it's part time for schooling, or again, still having a full ride because,
Mhm.
we're using our bodies, but part time work.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so, having it to where you can go to school for like doing the full classes, but
Mhm.
you know, you get an opportunity to take the classes you want to take.
Yeah,
And
100%.
so if you are a football player but you want to be an engineer,
Mhm.
you have an opportunity to get into some of those engineering classes
Yeah.
and figuring out a way to work around that
Yeah.
to get in your practice.
Because that's really what it comes down to is finding a formula that is realistic and that works, where it balances those three aspects,
Hmm.
the financial stability of that student,
Yeah.
the capability of that student and the time that they have to devote to their athletics, and keeping all of that in balance so that
Yeah.
that person can be successful in their path and their education. That was the third prong.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so just to kind of, I know we gave this whole background about student athletes and whether or not they should get paid, which after I introduced the bill, I just want to add another aspect to it
Yeah, we
that's
should talk about it.
relevant to COVID times, but just to give everybody an update. So Senate Bill 94 hit the regular session for this 2021 session year. And so essentially, this bill is related to athletics, and it enacts the Student Athlete Endorsement Act, which prohibits imposition of limitations against student athlete and certain other individuals earning compensation from the use of their name, image, or likeness, allowing for allowing for the professional representation of a student athlete by an agent for matters arising from the use of the student athlete's name, image, or likeness.
Oh wow. Okay, so currently it was set up to where like you couldn't, I guess that makes sense. Okay, it's all clicking. You were seeing this happen in my brain, but you couldn't even get like an agent or anything to make these plays for you cuz you're not even allowed to do that in the first place. So this bill is enabling you to be, represented for, your image, your likeness, your talents, that
Yeah,
sort of thing. Okay.
exactly.
Got it.
And with this bill, essentially, well, in the past, say you had like a really good year, basketball,
Mhm.
football, or whatever it may look like, and you wanted to put your name in the draft, or you're thinking about going professional.
Mhm.
In the past, if you did that, your amateur status would be
Revoked.
revoked, and so you would no longer have a guaranteed scholarship at the university because you put your name into the professional portal.
So you're kind of being punished for planning for like your next steps after college?
Exactly.
Mm, I
Hmm.
don't like it.
Yeah, and it's like, you have these student athletes who you at the end of the day, we a lot of times, well, me personally, not I
Mhm.
won't speak for every student athlete,
Yeah,
but
your experience.
for me, from my experiences and me personally, there were situations or times where I might have wanted to go professional, but
Mhm.
it was either me going professional or trying to go professional. Things don't work out, and now it's like, where do I go?
Yeah.
And maybe I didn't finish my education
Right.
all the way, or having to stick out, uh, being in a certain place and still you
Wow.
know,
Yeah.
still not liking it, wanting to go professional, but I have to worry about not only getting a scholarship, like making sure I have another meal, making sure I have everything set up because,
Yeah.
especially nowadays, if you don't have a degree,
Mhm.
it's hard to really navigate whether it's associates, bachelor's, master's, whatever it be.
Mhm.
But it's like, if
Yeah.
you going to school, if you're not guaranteeing that you are getting a professional contract either in the
Mhm.
NBA or overseas,
Yeah.
you're in a weird position where now you got to pay for your last semester or last couple of
Yeah.
semesters of schooling, and you don't have like all this other stuff to fall back on.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that seems to be counterproductive.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you're putting in all of this effort, committing all this time to, refining yourself and your craft and your sport as a
Hmm.
student athlete. And so naturally the next steps of that are like, okay, how do I elevate in this? Like
Yeah.
obviously I'm not going to be a student, 4 or 5 years and then what's next, right? I mean,
Hmm.
you have to be planning for that ahead of time, and there has to be that ability to kind of transition. So from that standpoint of just being able to transition into what's next for a student athlete
Hmm.
and what comes after college and really building their life, which is what college is for, whether you're
Exactly.
just getting education, whether you're an athlete, like literally this is the time in your life where you're laying the framework for who you're going to be as an adult, a professional, how you're gonna show up in the world.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. And
mm,
it's a very weird and interesting dynamic dealing with athletics, but dealing with university athletics in
yeah,
particular.
100%.
And so, just kind of going back to the bill, there are several things that were included in the bill.
Okay.
One was the university or post secondary education institution shall not prohibit or otherwise prevent a student athlete from earning compensation as a result of the use of the student athlete's name, image, or likeness. And
Okay.
so, again, you can't prohibit a student athlete from making money off of themselves.
Right. Whether that's their image on a poster or
Exactly.
merch
A
or whatever.
jersey,
Okay.
yeah, mugs,
Got it.
all that. And so another thing, you post secondary institution cannot also cannot withhold or revoke a scholarship as a result of a student athlete earning compensation or obtaining professional representation pursuant to the Student Athlete Endorsement Act.
So,
So again, you can't just because a student athlete wants to get an agent because they've had a good season or they're looking to pursue a professional career,
mhm.
you can't take their scholarship away for them trying to figure things out.
Right. That's an added protection there where it's like,
Hmm.
okay, I can plan and I can go and get an agent and make moves without fear of losing
Hmm.
money from education. Okay.
Exactly. And then another part, an athletic association or athletic conference shall not prohibit or otherwise prevent a student athlete from earning compensation as a result of the use of the student athlete's name, image, or likeness, or an individual who earned compensation as a result of the use of the individual's name, image, or likeness before enrollment into a post secondary educational institution from participating in intercollegiate athletics on the basis of the individual's earned compensation for the use of the individual's name, image or likeness.
Break that one down.
So
So I heard before. So this
yeah,
is kind of like inclusive of like the timeline before they even get into college,
exactly.
right?
And
Okay.
so say for instance you're a player and um you come from overseas and
Mm-hmm.
you played in a professional league, because it's a lot different in like Europe and Asia and all those, and Africa. Like
Mm-hmm.
you have opportunities to be 15, 16, 17 playing for a professional team earning
Mm.
money.
Okay.
And then a lot of times, which is it's even crazier to me, because you have these foreigners coming from overseas playing
Mm-hmm.
in these professional leagues, but you have these black kids who are here in the backyard
Mm-hmm.
and we play in a professional league, we get in trouble. Or
Yeah.
like we're making money prior to, and we have like this
Mm.
whole scandal or this whole thing.
Ah, but okay, but since it's not that way, there's some people that are coming in and they've already been playing professional.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. That doesn't seem fair to have that mixing, but this bill seems like it'll kind of level that
Yeah.
playing field, if you will.
Exactly. And so if you're like before you go to college, if you end up playing or getting money, like
Mhm.
say you play in like a money tournament
Mhm.
or you play somewhere and you're getting paid for it, they can't withhold your scholarship, or they can't penalize you because you made money before going to the actual college or university.
Okay.
And so
Good breakdown.
thank you. And so just before I go more into the bill, one of the things that just popped into my mind was playing right now during COVID times, right?
Yeah.
And so I I personally don't agree with these high school, college, or professional players having to play during COVID, because again, it's like we're
It's
just
COVID.
exactly,
Like,
and I understand. I'm not speaking for everybody. I understand there
yeah.
are certain people who want to play,
Yeah,
and
for
just
sure.
because again, um, I understand what it's like not being able to play a sport that you love or do something that you love, and you not being able to do it because
Yeah.
of X, Y, and Z. But I don't think that these athletes, student athletes, and athletes should be forced to play during these times. And to that point, if they are forced to play, I don't know like all of the details, but if they are forced to play, they should be getting hazard pay.
Ugh, and I was literally right as you said hazard pay, I was like, that's equivalent
Mm.
to hazard pay, right? So you have frontline workers that
Yes.
are have to go out and expose themselves to this virus,
Hmm.
and they are compensated. For those who aren't familiar with hazard pay, you're compensated for basically being put in harm's way. And so I agree with you 100%. I mean, if you have to, if becomes a requirement, obviously it's different if you have the option to opt out,
Yeah.
but if it becomes a requirement, yeah, you should be compensated for going out there and exposing yourself, because I mean, we know what the guidelines are from the government as far as what, you know, precautions need to be taken to not spread or contract the virus.
Exactly.
And, if you're going out into, this sports world and you're around all these other athletes and you're playing and everything's just full swing,
Yeah.
we know that the risk is higher.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's a very interesting place that we're in, where there's so many people with this let them play movement saying, you know, they need to be out there right
Yeah,
now.
exactly. And it's like, again, you have like certain students and certain kids who are like in high school or like getting to high school, and it's like your
Mhm.
parents are like, they need to play, they want to play. It's
Mhm.
like, let the kids speak. If the kid
Mhm.
says they want to play, that's one thing. But
Yeah.
I just don't think that every kid out there is
Yeah.
wanting to put their life on the line. Maybe they are,
Yeah.
I can't speak for them.
I mean, even on the flip side, right? Like, I wasn't raised to where it's like, oh, well, the kid knows best. I mean, like, where do we step in as the adults and say, even if that is the case, and they're like, let's get out there, but honey, like there's still a pandemic.
Exactly.
Like,
Like,
so it's I don't know, it's a double-edged sword. I get it because I have seen, the videos where of footage of protests and things like that where these kids are like, football's my therapy and I get
yeah.
it. Music's my therapy,
Hmm.
so I know how I would feel if I was in a position where I wasn't able to do that. But at the same time, we can all agree that is if we take the precautions we need to now, then it'll be less long term. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Like this isn't going to be forever. COVID is not permanent. It's not going to be limiting us forever, but we do have to, stick it out in some regards so we can like get through it so that, people can get back to doing things that feel good to them.
Exactly. And just to add another aspect to it, okay. So you're forcing these individuals to play, or you want them to play.
Mhm.
Are you willing to go out of pocket to put like a $10,000 insurance policy to
Mhm.
where if they have adverse effects, lifelong adverse
Mhm.
effects to getting COVID, that they get $1 million,
Mm.
$2 million for
Mm.
contracting COVID, and now they have a regular heart or they're dealing
Permanent
with
lung
permanent lung
damage.
damage?
Yeah.
Are you willing to, as a parent or as an institution, to back these individuals for
Mhm.
their lifetime protection because you're putting their lives on the line?
Mm. I mean, that's the question. That's a really good question. It's a hard question. It's a serious question because that's really a possibility in these times. We've seen with COVID the adverse long-term effects that it
Mhm.
has on the body. I actually have my uncle, he lives in Florida and he and his girlfriend got COVID a
Mhm.
while back and he just still is not him. This was months ago. And he's
Yeah.
like, I just still don't feel 100%. I don't feel right,
Mhm.
So I'm glad you brought that up because maybe people aren't thinking about that. I think when
Mhm.
it comes to, athletics and, there's a lot of passion involved, but it's like, are we thinking long term?
Yeah.
Are we thinking about the collateral damage or the collateral costs
Mhm.
of making this decision in the present? Knowing what the long-term repercussions could be.
Exactly. And I understand that there are certain situations where families and children and individuals don't necessarily have the privileges or the resources not to have their kids in certain settings. And
Mhm,
it's like, do you want your kid to be at home alone, or,
mhm,
would you rather have them in like a group setting? Like, I understand that, there's a lot of situations, there's a lot of stipulations
mhm,
behind having kids play and like having kids get paid. But I'm just
mhm,
saying that we just need to really look at the big picture and really for people who are privileged, like, do you want to put your kids through that? And for people
mm,
who aren't necessarily have those resources available, what do we need to do to allocate resources to support them in
mhm.
being able to make sure their kid is good because they need help, or
Yeah,
there needs to be additional support.
yeah, 100%. Mm-mm-mm.
Mm,
It's a lot to take in, and I mean, it's like I said, hard questions, tough questions,
yeah,
necessary questions,
exactly.
right? So I'm glad that we were able to, touch on all of the aspects of, this conversation and athletics and, student athletes being compensated. I feel
Hmm.
like I understand the scope a little bit better,
Yeah.
for people that aren't close to athletics, you may think like, well, how does this like even impact me, right?
Hmm.
Well, these student athletes are make up a part of our community.
Oh yeah.
These are gonna be, like you said, these are gonna not only be your basketball players and your football players and soccer. These are gonna be your engineers, these are gonna be your PR specialists. These are gonna be, all of these professionals that make up our community. So
Hmm.
first and foremost, they're students,
Yeah.
so I think all of us have agreed as a society that, that's important. Our students are important. Education's an important cornerstone, and how that whole thing goes is an
Yeah.
important cornerstone of how well our community does,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh yeah.
So,
And just to add to that, again, like for these higher risk sports,
mhm,
these are gonna directly affect mainly black indigenous people of color. Like,
Absolutely.
so we need to be aware of, again, like
Mhm.
the what's going on, the legislation that's going to affect us, because
Mhm.
we're the ones who are making money for this institution.
Yeah.
You look on TV, what do you see? Mainly
Mhm.
black kids and or black student athletes,
Yeah.
or and student athletes that are of color.
Right.
And it's like we're the ones who are risking our lives. I
Mhm.
mean, you look at golf,
Mhm.
nothing against the golfers and everything, but you don't have to have your mask off, and you can
Yeah.
social distance a lot easier because you're one person hitting the ball
Yeah.
versus you being on the basketball court, and now you're playing, it's 12, 13 people, depending on like who's on
The
the court.
proximity.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mhm.
exactly. And so you got these football players. There's
Yeah.
all these football players on the field. You got the soccer players. You got the volleyball players having to
Yeah.
be in close proximity. But you
Yeah.
got the golf. You got one person golfing, tennis, maybe one or two.
Yeah, and I'd say I don't know if you're like adverse to like any of that, like check your privilege. Like look
Hmm.
at yourself because maybe you're not in a situation where like people would be depending on you like keeping your health or keeping your scholarship. But a lot of these athletes like we mentioned before have whole systems and whole families of people like depending on them. So if COVID takes them out or if they're trying to set up a future for their family and they're not being compensated properly, like that impacts different groups of people differently. And we
Exactly.
know, what we're talking about when we say that. So yeah, check your privilege because,
Hmm.
it might not impact you the same way for you to go out there and expose yourself or for you to give your all and not be compensated. But the next person's situation might be different. It probably is different. That's just
Exactly.
the nature of it. So
Yeah, no, definitely.
yeah.
But um again, I think that there's a lot of things that need to be looked at and revisited. We just got to continue to re-educate people and make
Yeah.
people aware of the different issues and inequities that are going on specific to the Black community. And
Yeah.
athletics is a big part of the Black community because we're always siphoned into entertainment. And so
100%.
just know now you can
Mhm.
get paid, you can get
Yeah.
money, and all you New Mexican athletes, you're safe.
Yeah.
Hopefully, again, the legislation is there, but
We'll
now it's
see.
about enforcing the legislation and putting
Mhm.
it into practice, and so that's going to be a whole nother thing that we look at for the future.
Yeah. I wanted you to tell people where there's a website that you give out, and I don't want to butcher it. I think it's
Yeah,
nmlegis.gov.
yeah.
Did I get that right?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
no,
All
that was
right. All
perfect.
right, brain.
See, look at you.
Go to nmlegis, legis.gov in order to stay up to date on the latest legislation in the state of New Mexico. And then, of course, go and visit us on the website for the New Mexico State Office of African American Affairs. That's OAAA, so OAAA.nm.state.us. Go. Did I
Close.
get it wrong?
You're right there. So
Say it correctly, Devin.
it's
AA.
OAAA dot state
State.
dot nm dot us. You're right there
Got
though.
it. Okay. Dot state. .nm.us. Got it. Go there. Make sure to like, share, comment, interact with us. We always love hearing from you. Pass this along to somebody that you think could use it. And other than that, we're sending y'all good vibes. Make sure you check back in with us in the near future for episode 3. And we'll see y'all later.
Deuces.